Dr. Aparna's CM is, I am the regular moderator. I am proud of it and I love it. So my duty to introduce someone whom everyone knows. So Dr. Aparna is Director of Cardiology, Fortis Escort Hospital. And the topic for today is, when do you think of an electrophysiologist? मुझे एक बहुत मशहूर गाने की एक लाइन याद आ गई थी, दिल जब जिद पर आएगा उसको कौन मनाएगा? डॉक्टर अपर्णा है, मना लेगी, उसको मना भी लेंगी, सीधा भी कर लेंगी. Thank you and all yours.
Thank you so much, sir. I think I have mic, sir. But I don't mind.
Can we have a big clap for ma'am?
Good evening to all of you. At the outset, I would like to thank all of you for being here amongst us. And I think I would not be doing my duty well enough if I did not introduce you about Biotronic. So I think we've all been listening to the other big industry manufacturers about devices. But of course, it's very interesting and important to understand that when we speak of Biotronic, it's a German company, and as you all know, German companies are very sturdy. The reason I like them is that they've had several firsts in their cap. One of the firsts that they had was that they were the first company to have remote monitoring of devices. What does that mean? The patient gets a device, goes home, and they were the first company where the patient, no matter where in the world, could be remotely monitored. They were also the first company to have ICDs, which were in a specific format called the BDD pacing. We touch that if need be. They also are the first, as Dr. Sushil just said, about being MRI guard 24/7. Let me just give you a thing. He went through that a little fast. So today we have all patients who are implanted devices. All the devices are MRI compatible. No device is MRI safe. What does that mean? That means if a patient has a device, he can have an MRI done, but it is not something that he can directly walk into an MRI suite and get the MRI done. What happens? If a patient has a device, he needs an MRI, you as a physician said have an MRI, suddenly the son will call us up. Doctor sir, my father needs an MRI, tell me the make of the MRI, of the device, and send the company guy. How can I ever remember what company the patient device is? It becomes very complex, and in some situations you need an MRI at the earliest. If it is a stroke, you need the MRI at the earliest. Today we have certain devices from Biotronic which are called Ambia series. If a patient has that device, he doesn't need to contact anybody. He can just walk into the MRI suite, no programming needs to be done, and the patient is ready. So that's what we wanted to talk to you about the company Biotronic. They are the world leaders, one amongst the others. Having said that, it's important to understand why am I here and why have we chosen this subject. So I'm sure you know and you all are part of, some of you would be part of Association of Physicians of India, some of you would be a part of Cardiological Society of India, some of you would be aware that there is a specific society called the Indian Heart Rhythm Society. So we are a very small body, we only have 400 members, tending to a population of probably 1.4 billion. So we are cardiac electrophysiologists. It is my duty to be a part of the Indian Heart Rhythm Society to send the message across to my fellow clinicians to know that you need to send a certain subset of your patients to electrophysiologists. Because you can think, a cardiologist can do everything. Why do I need an electrophysiologist? So these are my social media handles which were requested by some doctors, which I will share again at the end. We have Ms. Roshni, who has helped me a lot with my cases, with my slides, and she will surely ensure that all of you book onto our sessions. So why do you need an electrophysiologist? 20 minutes or 25 minutes, whatever we cover in that much time. So let's understand. You have an ECG which comes like this. Believe you me, this ECG leaves even electrophysiologists confused. What am I to do? In the emergency room, the patient comes in on this ECG. Look at this ECG. Can anyone tell me what is happening here? Is this an ECG at all? This patient is having ventricular fibrillation, a rhythm which all of us must dread, because this rhythm is a harbinger of death in humans. So when this rhythm arrives, remember, it is not a cardiologist. You need somebody beyond a cardiologist to understand, should I give amiodarone? Should I give Zylocard? Should I cardiovert? Should I defibrillate? Should I give epinephrine? What should I do here? So these are certain rhythms which can be challenging. And you know, he took away the mic. This is not working. Yeah. So am I audible? Yeah. So I must confess that we have taken nothing from Google. All of these are from our own hospitals of the cases that we see. So when I was telling Roshni, okay, quickly, this was a patient that we had survived, we treated him with temporary pacemaker. You can see we cardioverted the patient. I told her, quickly take the screen. You have to believe this, when she took the screen and we were making the slides, I realized that on this very monitor, there was another patient who was actually having a complete heart block going on, and probably the consultant cardiologist may have never known that the patient was actually having a complete heart block going on in this strip, which we can talk later. Subsequent to this, there are so many patients. Look at this, ventricular fibrillation. You need a cardiac electrophysiologist to decide the way forward for your patient, which can sometimes be challenging even for a cardiologist. So this is a child recently, just last week, and Roshni helps me with all my tasks in making. This child had come from Nepal. I purposefully made her stand like that so that nobody can ever recognize her for the rest of her life. But I wanted to take her picture so that you can assess the size of this child. So this child is from Nepal. Her father is a doctor, and she had congenital complete heart block. She received a pacemaker when she was 4 months old. Obviously, you should be aware that when we give pacemakers to children who are less than 1 or 2 years old, we give surgical intervention. We open up the heart, we open up the thorax, epicardial leads, and the pacemaker is put. This was an ECG. The ECG of the child who had received a pacemaker when she was just 4 months old, and now she was about 5 years old. So this is an ECG which looks very good, but anybody can tell me or ask me, do you think there are very big spikes? Normally pacemaker spikes are not this big. Do you agree with me? Whenever you give an abdominal implant, it is a unipolar pacing. So I sent this child for a pacemaker, for an X-ray chest. I told you the pacemaker was given in the abdomen, and there is a lead. So there is an incision made here, there is a tunnel made here, the surgeon opens the chest, you can see these clips, you can see the epicardial lead has been tunneled and the pacemaker has been implanted here. So this young child has now come. She has come because of this. And when did she come now? She has come now because so she has come in 2026 now, on 10th of July. I told you she came to us last week. Why did she come? She came because her father got the pacemaker checked, I'm sorry for this, in Nepal, and it told that the pacemaker battery had finished. So he brings his little child to us, that the battery is finished, doctor, what should I do? Believe you me, you cannot leave it at any doctor to decide for this child. This needs intricate care. This needs to understand, what do I do? So I drew it there. This is what we advised. This child has an epicardial pacemaker. You are all well aware that we give transvenous pacemakers. You are also aware we give leadless pacemakers. You are aware. In children, we don't give leadless pacemakers because to deliver the leadless pacemaker, the pipe which we put from the femoral is very large. It is 27 French. It's very large. So this child had only two choices. Either we give a transvenous implant or we change this implant. Now this calls for a lot of decision making. What do you do for this child? And hence I bring the mother. The mother says, Dr. Aparna, we entrust our child to you. Please tell what is right for her. So here it is important. Our decision as an electrophysiologist impacts this young life forever. What did we do? We did nothing. We said just remove this pacemaker, give her another abdominal implant. When she is older, we will give her a transvenous implant. And that's what I said. Go and meet the cardiac surgeon and we will not do anything for you but leave it alone. Similarly, look here, these are all patients from our hospital. This man was in 2003, he was 48 years old, 23 years ago. He underwent a mechanical aortic valve in 2003. He also underwent a pacemaker in 2003. You should be aware that when we give aortic valves, 5 to 7% of patients need a pacemaker because of close proximity of the aortic valve ring to our conduction system. So he got a pacemaker in 2003. Pacemaker batteries last approximately 10 to 15 years. So 11 years later, he comes back and he gets his pacemaker checked and replaced. His ejection fraction, you can see, is now falling. In 2026, just a few weeks ago, he comes to us. His battery is again finished because from 2014, it is now 12 years. His battery is finished, but look at his ejection fraction. It is sad, but it is true. His ejection fraction had dropped to 20%. Look what has happened to his left ventricle. It has become so dilated. Can you see the lead? This patient was given a pacemaker. This is a lead which is going from the right atrium to the right ventricle. So now he has developed poor heart pumping. His ejection fraction has come down. And look at his ECG. Now this is an ECG that none of us want to see. We don't want it for our loved ones. Why is that so? Can you see the width of the QRS? You can see a spike, and the QRS is so wide. What is the width of the QRS you should have at all times? Less than, absolutely, less than 120, less than 110 milliseconds. This is more than 160 milliseconds. If the QRS is wide, it only tells you that the ventricles are not contracting in a synchronized manner. It is compelling you that you must attempt to do something so that the QRS becomes better. So when this patient came, he had come with his battery finished, and now he comes to us with this ugly ECG. The QRS is so wide. He is very sick. We don't know what to do, but we tell him that we must intervene and make his ECG all right. Look at his ECG now. We have done a device. Can somebody tell me what device we must have given this patient?
Base-bundle pacing?
Absolutely. Wonderful. Conduction system pacing is what he has says. So one must remember, we give this patient, look at the pre-ECG and look at the post-ECG. We have completely transformed his ECG, transformation of the ECG, and electrical synchrony is telling you that it will result in mechanical synchrony, and the patient has a likelihood of improved ejection fraction and improved outcome. This is the patient that we have done. This is the device. What is this device? This is a CRT-D, and we have given this patient conduction system pacing, and the patient's problem has resolved. Bringing you to another patient. These are all our live patients. This is a lady. So this lady comes to the emergency room with this. Okay? You can see something is flickering in her neck. This is on the monitor. By the time, this is not in the emergency room, sorry, this is in the ambulance. And this is an ECG taken in the ambulance. She reaches the hospital and she's alright by then. So we tell the patient, let us do an ejection fraction. We see the ejection fraction is compromised. We do an angiogram. The angiogram is the patient does not have significant coronary artery disease. We take the patient to the electrophysiological lab. We induce the tachycardia. She has what we call PSVT, as you can see. We do a three-dimensional mapping. We remove the arrhythmia. However, after the ablation of PSVT, we do the ECG. Can you see some abnormality on this ECG? Anybody can tell me? Can you see some abnormality? Absolutely. There are PVCs. If at this point in time, all of us in this room were to have a Holter, each one of us, 60% of us will have PVCs. But none of us know it, right? None of us feel them. So you don't need to worry about PVCs if your heart is otherwise structurally normal. I often see PVCs being treated with amiodarone. You don't need to treat PVCs with amiodarone, but you need to treat PVCs if the patient has LV dysfunction. I told you, this patient had a poor ejection fraction. And look, her PVC burden is 20,000. If all of us have a normal heart, and all of us have a Holter, 50 to 60% of us will have some PVCs. But we should not have more than 250 in 24 hours. How many was she having? 20,000. A very high burden of PVCs with heart pumping which had come down. So we take her back to the EP lab, and in the EP lab, we ablate the PVCs and make her rhythm absolutely normal. And that's the ECG, and that's what we do. Bringing you to the point that yes, you need a cardiac electrophysiologist. These cases cannot be treated by a specialty which is called cardiac electrophysiology because it needs specialized care, understanding the rhythm of the heart, understanding the nuances of the electrical system of the heart. However, there are just 400 of us in this country. Isn't that a very small number? It is. It is because the journey is daunting, it is very long, and reimbursements are very little. Hence, very few want to be in this specialty. But yes, now, as more and more of us are living longer, we are seeing more and more cardiologists wanting to take up electrophysiology. What is electrophysiology? Very simply said, it is just positioning several wires inside the heart to understand how the electricity is moving inside the heart. You want to know which chamber gets excited the first, which chamber gets excited the last. How do we discern that? We discern that by positioning several electrodes inside the heart, wires from the femoral veins. They see where is the electricity emanating from. However, when we do that, we go back to our days of anatomy. We never knew when we were doing MBBS that cardiac anatomy can be this complex. We have to understand each part of the heart where the electrical abnormality could be arising from, and subsequently we treat them. All of you at some point in time would have seen this slide of mine, because this is a slide which I really enjoy. This is the SA node. The electricity emanates from here. It enters the left atrium via a specialized bundle called the Buckman's bundle. Then it comes to the AV node. Then it comes to the bundle of His. It is called the bundle of His because it was diagnosed by Dr. His. That's why it's called the bundle of His. And then it goes into the left bundle and the right bundle branches, and that's how the electrical system works. Is not it fascinating? Is not it fascinating that our heart just keeps beating 60 to 100 times a minute without even letting us know, because the sinus node has a unique property called automaticity. It has a very unique property of automaticity. But it will also interest you. Supposing the sinus node stops working as we get older, you get wrinkles on your hands, you get wrinkles on your face, Even the heart gets wrinkles. The sinus node becomes wrinkled. It stops working. But as fascinating as science is, the sinus node stops working. Human body is so resilient that there are latent pacemakers. If the sinus node stops working, the AV node starts working. We don't die, we just develop sinus bradycardia. If the AV node also stops working, you will have an AV junction. If the AV junction also stops working, there is escape which comes from the bundle branches. I always say this and make fun that human body is very resilient and it survives despite us. Yeah, it takes a lot of effort to kill a patient, right? So you work very hard. It doesn't allow you to be really, really mean and bad to kill a patient. So you can really save every life, or at least make a very sincere attempt to do so. You will fail, but the likelihood of failure diminishes. So I think by now I've sent the message across very clear that there are certain pointers in time that you need a cardiac electrophysiologist. And let me tell you, in the IHRS, it is our duty that we are told to speak to everybody that consider an electrophysiologist simply because the decision made for your patient should be appropriate. Right device for the right patient, which implicates that life for life. Like the child I showed you, if I made a wrong decision, it would implicate that child for life. What does that mean, you could ask me? Supposing I gave her a pacemaker. I have given transvenous pacemakers to children as small as 2 years. But that's because it was needed at that point in time. What if I give that small child a transvenous pacemaker? What will happen? She is currently 6 years of age. A pacemaker will live for 10 years, 15 years at the most. The battery will finish. She will come. I will replace again. Her lead will break. I will give her on the other side. That lead will break. I will replace. She will get infected at some point in time. She will develop infective endocarditis. She will not be able to survive. So that compassion has to be there in the right decision making when you deal with such patients. Hence, always think of a cardiac electrophysiologist when you're dealing with arrhythmias. Our role is specified in management of arrhythmias, which could be bradycardia or tachycardia. Bradycardia is when the rate is less than 60 beats per minute. Tachycardia when the rate is more than 100 beats per minute. When you see a narrow complex tachycardia, you don't worry. Nobody jumps. But when you see a wide complex tachycardia, you worry. Why do you worry when you see a wide complex tachycardia? It's a harbinger of death. A VT, a VF means death is very close. So whenever you have a wide complex tachycardia, I always say this, that if I was working in the emergency room and if I had a holder and when a wide complex tachycardia arrives, I will be having tachycardia myself. Because you need to have it. You need to save that life, act quick. Cardio what? Or defibrillate. You have to make that quick decision. So that's the role of all of us to decide for the patient. And of course, you are all very, very aware and you are using all these diagnostics, echo, Holter, loop recorders to identify arrhythmias. Roshni has brought this little device, she will show it to you later. This is the latest device which all of us carry in our pockets. What is this? It's an ECG machine. What kind? It's a cardia machine. It's a 6-lead ECG machine. I always carry it in my purse. I have given it to my parents. I have given it to my sister. So this device allows you to do an ECG. So this is a 6-lead ECG machine. Even more fascinating can it be, this is a visiting card. This is a visiting card of the company that makes that ECG machine, but this in itself is an ECG machine. Can you believe it? This is a 2-lead ECG machine for the capture of arrhythmias, and Roshni will demonstrate it to you at the end of the session, those of you who are interested to learn more about this. The reason we show that is we all must exploit diagnostics. What does it mean? It means that whenever you think the patient has any palpitation, get a Holter done. It will just cost a little money, but you will be amazed by the number of arrhythmias that you can pick up when you do Holters. So exploit the diagnostics, but use therapeutics very judiciously. One of the diagnostics, apart from this ECG machine, is an implantable loop recorder where we place it under the chest wall and we insert it with the help of a syringe. This is inserted under the skin. It lasts for 5 years. It is MRI compatible and can be remotely monitored. You can get all the data from there. And of course, quickly walking through your bradycardia, all of you are aware. If a patient has bradycardia, he needs a pacemaker. It could be single chamber, double chamber, or can be a leadless pacemaker. You are aware a pacemaker implantation is a relatively simple procedure, and traditionally this is where we have been implanting the pacemaker leads. The pacemaker leads goes into the one into the right ventricle and the other into the right atrium, and it is attached to a small device which is called a pacemaker. We've become very good at them. We do very complex pacemakers, and we can do pacemakers with look at the number of leads entangled there. But that's not the agenda. The agenda is today, you don't want to do a pacemaker like the one that I showed you. I just showed you that you put a pacemaker lead here. And you already saw that a patient's normal rhythm should come from above and go down via the specialized conduction system. If you position a lead right here, it is going to activate the ventricular myocardium in an opposite direction. Heart was supposed to be activated from base to apex. If you activate from apex to base, it is intuitive to understand, believe that you will induce cardiomyopathy. So, this is called pacing-induced cardiomyopathy. To save our patients, we are trying to understand where should we pace. Someone out of this group already made a mention that we should do conduction system pacing. What does conduction system pacing mean? It means this, that we capture the conduction system. We capture the left bundle. We put the lead from the right ventricle, our lead tunnels, screws across the septum and captures the left bundle. As a result, activates the ventricle from base to apex. That is what the newer technology of conduction system pacing is. And this is one of our recent patients, 53-year-old young male. I get scared sometimes because I'm reaching there. A 53-year-old male comes with symptoms, right? He had syncope. He comes to our hospital. On the ECG, we see left bundle. CT angio is non-critical. EF is 45%. Left bundle branch block with syncope. Think of a pacemaker. Patient said, no, I'm not getting it done. This was the ECG. Clearly, you can see left bundle. Okay? You can see D5, D6, D1, ADL. Wide QRS. He said, I'm fine, doctor. I'll go home. We say, okay, go home. You can see this patient's loop recorder. He goes home on external loop recorder. I hope you can make out that on the loop recorder, there is a 2:1 block. This is a QRS, there is a P, no QRS. P, QRS. P, no QRS. P, QRS. P, no QRS. So out of 2 beats, one is being conducted. That is called 2:1 AV block. Left bundle branch block, syncope, 2:1. He clearly needs a pacemaker. We take him to the lab. We understand the need for a pacemaker. We do a pacemaker. So you can ask me, why am I showing you? I'm showing you this because this is a new way of doing pacing. We have been doing pacemakers for the past 60 years. For the past 60 years, we have been trying to decipher where do we position the RV lead. It seems like we've reached the sweet spot. It seems like. So we go and we position it. Just look how we do it. I told you where is the right ventricle, across the septum, capture the left bundle, and this is how it looks. This is one of our patients we recently did. But did we actually make the change to his life? Let me show you his ECG after a pacemaker. Look at this. This is his ECG after a pacemaker. Can you even feel there is a pacemaker? Look at the QRS. How narrow and beautiful this is for a young man with conduction system pacing. Remember I showed you a guy who had, look at this. The first case I showed you, who had come after AVR with a pacemaker. Ugly, wide QRS, 160 milliseconds, ejection fraction of 20%, and compare with what we have done. Look at this, beautiful. This is called physiological pacing. It is called physiological ECG, and this is the near physiological. It is called cardiac physiological pacing, and that's why you need to do good work even when it is a simple pacemaker. We'll finish with leadless pacing. So there's a lot of noise about it. Do you have a leadless pacemaker with you? Okay, there's a lot of noise around leadless pacemakers. It's kept next to a supradyn capsule, right? It is just as much as a capsule. You can see the capsule has been positioned inside the right ventricle. Any of your cardiologist friends, if they tell you, I will give your patient a leadless pacemaker, it should not be asked for. You have learned today that you don't want to place the right ventricle apex. Look where the leadless pacemaker is positioned, right at the apex. However, there are certain patients who need a leadless pacemaker. Don't be hungry to give a leadless to everybody. There is a subset for everything. So here a leadless. I will show you one of our patients whom we gave a leadless pacemaker. This is how they look, leadless pacemakers. So I will share with you this patient. She was a 72-year-old lady. She had a pacemaker implanted in AIIMS in 2022. 5 months later, 4 years ago, she had loss of capture. Then the pocket was reopened and the leads were repositioned. So pocket had opened twice. Once for the new pacemaker, then reopened because it had to be done again. Everything okay. Now she is already in South Africa. And I receive a call from one of the top people that, she was already in South Africa. She's had a pre-syncope in South Africa. She got a pacemaker checked in South Africa. And they said there is loss of ventricular capture. This is the ECG she came with. Clearly you can see, despite a pacemaker, she has complete heart block. She has a pacemaker, but it is not working. Why was it not working? The reason is this. So this is a lady who is heavy. So remember, in women who are chest heavy breasts, the pacemaker leads can sometimes be pulled back. You can ask me, is it really pulled back? Look here. Why is it pulled back? Her right ventricle is here, but her lead has come back from here into this. This was a patient who was an ideal candidate for leadless pacemaker because her pocket had already opened twice. Every time it is done, her lead comes back, so we gave her a leadless pacemaker. I think with that I would like to conclude, and I will be happy for any questions.
Very good.
I must let you know though. Please bear with me. I must let you know I have only completed 1/3 of the presentation. But my senior colleague, my mentor, my dearest friend, Dr. Anil Saxena told me once, when I was very young, that if you want to be re-invited, always keep your presentation short.
Doctor, I would request most of you to please stay back. There are some senior members who always like to take dinner, and I will not stop them because otherwise if I stop them they will go without dinner, and that's never the target. But I think whoever is staying here, please stay and ask some questions. We had a wonderful session and you can please come here. Let's give a big hand to Dr. Aparna. Every time she comes, we learn a lot from her. And before I come to you, I would give it to my moderator, Dr. Amal Kalra sir, to set the context.
Dear friends, we must acknowledge yet another masterly talk by our best orator friend. Ma'am, it was all very, very interesting, and rather we wanted more words from you, although you have kept the talk short so that we interact more. So these days we have hybrid cars. They can run on electricity and petrol, and the battery gets charged while it is working. So are there in pipeline or in our imagination the pacemakers? They will not need any change in the battery, or it is charged by itself.
I think pacing is one arena where science is growing very rapidly and it's leaping ahead. So we are the kind of pacemakers we've always traditionally had. But it seems, and we still implant these, but it seems to me he soon will be out of vogue. So there is a lot of work going on that could the pacemaker be charged with cardiac motility? It is happening. However, it seems to me it will fall apart because the leadless pacemakers, which seem to be a thing of tomorrow and will adhere to stay, they already have a battery of about 15 to 20 years. So probably it will not be needed because the platform of the battery technology is growing so rapidly. Even these batteries last about 15 years, 20 years now. So that we must be taken care of.
Well, it was rather not so inspiring that we have very less number of electrophysiologists. Why are you not reproducing more? Is it less attractive or more tough?
So I think whenever we have a cardiologist who gets trained and comes out, he's done his 5 years of MBBS, then he's done his internship, then he's done his 3 years of MD medicine, then he's striving to get a seat in cardiology, then he does 3 years of cardiology, subsequent to which he is now ready to make money. And he's not willing as much to again get trained further. Electrophysiology means you need to reinvest 2 years, but I think I've been investing 20 years and I don't think I'm still there. So it's very demanding, and the procedure, like if you put a stent, it takes 40 minutes. But when you do a radiofrequency ablation, it can take anywhere from 1.5 hours to 3 hours, 5 hours. Our remuneration does not change. Our radiation dose is very high. So yes, it is a little taxing, and but I'm hoping that it will increase. What we are seeing and why I'm here, like from IHRS, is we see interventional cardiologists wish to do pacemakers, which is fair because we cannot be doing all of the burden, right, with such a small number. But at the same time, we should drive the message home that everything should be done appropriately for a given patient.
Well, your message that when to refer or when we remind, or we are reminded of the electrophysiologist is very, very clear. There are so tough cases at times. Just wanted to know one more question from you. ILR for 5 years is very, very interesting thing. Who needs for 5 years ILR? Why don't you make the thing correct at your end?
Yeah, so you're very right. As a result of this, so ILRs, the insertable loop recorders, came into the world, I should say they were developed before we had external loop recorders. So external loop, earlier we used to have just filters. Today we have external loop recorders for 5 days, 10 days, 1 month, and then we have these Cardia, we have the Apple Watch. So the insertable loop recorders are actually not being used to their fullest, and they're expensive. But still there is a proportion of patients where we want to be. So which is that proportion of patients? Largely it is to look out for those patients who had cryptogenic stroke. You want to pick up atrial fibrillation. It is paroxysmal AFib. You can't identify AFib. That is one subset. Second, syncope is an enigma. There are certain subsets of patients you can't identify the cause of syncope. And you can't treat them with a pacemaker because unless you know why he had a syncope. So we give an insertable loop recorder. When they came, they were for 3 years. But just as technology got better, they became for 5 years.
Ma'am, as a renowned electrophysiologist, and for my lot of GPs are here, when they get a ECG, you said when to refer to an electrophysiologist. So, some simple questions and straight answers. So, should they refer the case to you when they see a case of tachycardia on ECG or bradycardia, which is more urgent?
Both.
Both.
Yes, both. So tachycardia, if it is narrow tachycardia, the patient may need an ablation. If it's a wide complex tachycardia, the patient may need an ablation or an ICD. If it's a bradycardia, it's very important because the patient should be given conduction system pacing. The patient may need a leadless pacemaker. So I would recommend that any rhythm abnormality, just like if you have a patient who has chest pain, you think of an interventional cardiologist when a patient has a rhythm abnormality, you should think of an electrophysiologist.
Great. Very, very good answer, ma'am. Ma'am, my second question is you yourself alluded to it just a short while ago about the ELR, the 5-day, the 7-day, the 10-day, the 1 month. Which is the minimum period that we should recommend Holter monitoring or ECG monitoring for? There are a lot of us who are doing it only for 24 hours and we are not able to pick up what we are trying to look for. So your recommendation.
So it has been very well studied. The yield of diagnostics is much better if you extend the monitoring to a week. So you should want to, depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for PSVT, please don't do a Holter or ELR. A PSVT can happen after 3 months, may happen after 6 months. But if you're looking for atrial fibrillation, please do it at least for a week. That's the minimum time. If you're looking for ventricular arrhythmias, depends. Now, if you're looking for a ventricular arrhythmia with normal heart, writing PVCs for a normal heart, even a single day is enough. If you're looking for PVCs or a VT in LV dysfunction, you should not look for it. You should anyway want to give the patient an ICD. Don't wait for him to have a VT.
Right, ma'am. Good answer, ma'am. Ma'am, I wanted to ask you, a patient who is a senior of mine from my school, he had 3 distinct episodes of near unconsciousness in his toilet. At one time, the bathroom door had to be broken open, and then he was found, fallen on the ground in the bathroom. He was taken to the hospital and they did a ECG which was normal. He came to me and I did a ELR for him for 5 days. And it showed 2 distinct episodes of pauses more than 2.20 seconds. Now I referred him to a cardiologist, ma'am, and he said that we don't have the classical indication of more than 2.5. So we have to observe him. Now what would you do with 3 distinct episodes of unconsciousness with pauses greater than 2.2, 2 episodes on 5-day ELR?
So please remember, whenever you want to unravel the cause of syncope, history is first and foremost. Your first sentence told me that this patient will probably not use a pacemaker. You said he fell in the washroom. Every time he fell in the washroom, whenever the syncope has a situation, it is called situational syncope. Like children fall in the assembly lines on a hot summer day. Elderly patients fall in the washroom which is called micturition syncope. Cough syncope. Whenever it is a situation, it is more often than not a vasovagal syncope. That's the answer first. Second, there is no number. The 2 second, 2.9 second, 3 second pause, no. It is documented symptomatic bradycardia. Whenever we give a pacemaker, we are trying to allay his symptoms. It is that is to be removed. Symptomatic bradycardia. If he was symptomatic with a 2.5 second pause, he deserves a pacemaker. If he had a 2.5 second pause and he didn't know anything, it happened in the middle of the night, please do nothing. The pause mentioned in the guidelines is as long as 6 seconds to give a pacemaker. So please, pacemakers should not be given because I always say and believe it implicates a patient for life.
This patient, ma'am, the one that I just talked to you, does he deserve a pacemaker or no?
I am not convinced.
You are not convinced. Right, ma'am. Ma'am, one of the important things that many of my friends would like to ask you, and that is why Sajid is here, ma'am. Sajid Pavel is one of the best GPs I have ever come across in life, although he resembles Vijay Anand. कोरा कागज था ये मन मेरा, लिख दिया नाम से तेरा. So, ma'am, he came to attend your lecture and he wanted to ask you, he will ask you questions anyway. if he discovers a case of VPCs, how should he investigate those VPCs? How extensively and how aggressively and when? When they are multifocal, or when you see something as sinister as ROT, or they are no longer valid?
So as I told you, if you want to keep it very simple, because VPCs is a Pandora's box. As I told you, if all of us have normal hearts here in this room, and all of us tonight have holders put for 24 hours, 50 to 60% of us will have PVCs. But they are not perceptive, they are not perceptible to us. When you have PVCs, which are imperceptible, and they are less than 250 in 24 hours, you don't need to worry about them. You have a structurally normal heart. The question arises that if they are more in number, supposing me, I got my holter done, and
When do you call them multiple then? What is the number?
I'm coming to that. Anything more than 240 or more. Anything more than 240 in 24 hours or more. But supposing I did my holter, and I had a normal echo, no normal ejection fraction, no coronary artery disease, and I found in my holter, I did not have any problem, but I found on my holter, I have 10,000 PVCs. I'm an electrophysiologist. I've had them. When I was giving my cardiology exam, I remember going back home, I felt strange, I felt my pulse, and I knew I had them. And there were more than 10,000. Should I worry? No, I don't need to worry. I need to tell myself, calm and reassurance. Don't worry. However, if there are now more, 14,000, 20,000, and you see on echo, the LV is dilating, the ejection fraction is getting compromised, you do a cardiac MRI. You should do a cardiac MRI if the PVCs are more than 2,000 to 5,000, you should do a cardiac MRI. Please remember, exploit the diagnostics. You do a cardiac MRI. The cardiac MRI is absolutely clean. Don't worry. But I told you the LV is dilating. PVCs are more than 15,000. You should worry. But a very simple number that you can remember. If PVCs are more than 10,000 in 24 hours, or more than 10 in 1 hour, or more than 10% on a holter, talk to your cardiac electrophysiologist. You can talk even earlier, but you need to worry about them when they are number of 10,000 in 24 hours, 10% in 24 hours, or more than 10 in 1 hour.
Ma'am, ROT की भी कुछ बात करें?
Yeah, so when you have an ROT phenomena, that's not something that you look in the holder. ROT is the harbinger of death. ROT means your patient can have ventricular fibrillation. If we had the time, I would have shown you one of our recent cases who had ROT and she came in obesity strong, and we managed that lady with no amiodarone, because if your patient has ROT and you give amiodarone, you're giving a death pill. You need to treat those patients with Xylocard and Maxility. So remember, ROT is something that you have to be very cautious about. It doesn't routinely happen in a holter. If it happens, the patient may not wake up tomorrow morning. He can develop VF on the holter. So ROT is something which you should be very watchful in the emergency rooms, in the ICUs.
Ma'am, just the last question. VPCs in a patient who did not have a documented MI versus ventricular exosomes in a patient who has had a documented MI. डॉक्टर मनोहर गुप्ता सवाल पूछ के जाना सर आप हर बार 10 बजे निकल जाते हो, तुम इतना जो मुस्कुरा रहे हो, क्या सवाल है जो छुपा रहे हो? क्या सवाल है जो छुपा रहे हो? सर मैम, VPCs in a patient of documented MI versus VPCs in a patient of a person who has had MI, मैम कैसे आप अप्रोच करते हैं?
PVCs in MI, I will worry. PVCs in MI, you must ask for a cardiac MRI, even if the EF is 50%. PVCs in a normal heart without MI, don't worry, but yes, must investigate. Consider radiofrequency ablation. We have very rewarding results. I showed you one lady in the first case who had AVNRT as well as PVCs. So PVCs post MI, worry.
जी मैम बहुत अच्छा आपने पढ़ाया, और मैं तो हमेशा आई ऑलवेज कम आउट वाइजर ऑन द अदर साइड ऑफ योर टॉक्स मैम. और मैम मैं सिर्फ आपसे एक रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा, 5 जनवरी 2020 को हमने आपको फेलिसिटेट करने की कोशिश की थी, in a function of Physicians Forum of India. मैम आप उस दिन अवेलेबल नहीं हो पाई, आप बाहर थी, आप और आपके पीआरओ को हमने वो ट्रॉफी दी थी। इस बार मैं मैम आपसे रिक्वेस्ट करूँगा कि आप प्लीज अवेलेबल हो जाए, ठीक है? थैंक यू। मैं डॉक्टर प्रसाद को देता हूँ।
So there may be a time, maybe a few years from now, that sending a patient of arrhythmia just be referred to a cardiologist may not be sufficient, at least in Delhi. You may have to write, like as you said, refer to a electrophysiologist, maybe in few years' time.
It's already there.
Okay, you can't refer a patient of arrhythmia to a cardiologist at
Oh, you mean legally? You mean legally?
Legally,
No, I
legally.
don't think so.
Legally.
I don't think so. That would be appropriate. A cardiologist is trained during our training to look at arrhythmias. So maybe it will never be a medical legal issue. It's a choice which you will make. I don't think
It may be ethical issue where electrophysiologists are available and if you are not sending. Where they are not available, you may. So you, I think, mentioned a case where in case of RFA, heavy load was ablated. So was it done by, again, electrophysiologist? May not be. But at least a cardiologist?
Yeah, of course. It was done by a cardiologist, and I must tell you, sir, that when such patients arrive, I don't try to find out. I leave it there because it's not good to pinpoint our own fellow colleagues.
Yeah, I agree, I
So I
agree.
didn't even ask, but I know in that hospital there is no electrophysiologist where you got it done. So obviously it was not done by the right person.
And last, the leadless pacemaker, is it always to be implanted in the right ventricle?
No, you can also have a leadless in the right ventricle, you can have leadless in the right atrium, and in fact now they're getting specialized small, they are like a rice grain. It can be implanted in the left ventricle also. It's called WISE CRT.
डॉक्टर मनीष गुप्ता मैम।
And thank you for taking care of my family members. Ma'am, now atrial fibrillation, we haven't talked about AFib, right? AFib is also now a part of CKM, cardio-kidney metabolic syndrome, and that's the commonest arrhythmia which we see. A quick word on that, is there a role of, we see AFibs, but is it a role of referring to you and what would be the take on how do we assess that?
Yeah.
Very quickly.
So atrial fibrillation is such a big subject, but if I were to keep it very simple, atrial fibrillation is a disease of the elderly. Atrial fibrillation is lurking around all of us. Atrial fibrillation is a lifestyle disease today. Atrial fibrillation can come in various forms like paroxysmal, persistent and permanent atrial fibrillation depending upon its temporal profile. The most unfortunate part of atrial fibrillation is if you ask a neurologist, it often presents itself with the most dramatic, that is an ischemic stroke. So the European Society of Cardiology in 2020 in their guidelines of atrial fibrillation said that there should be opportunistic screening of atrial fibrillation by every doctor. They write that even an orthopedic surgeon as well as an ophthalmologist must feel the pulse of the patient so that no patient can pass by. And a very simplistic rule, 5%, 6% at 60, 7% at 70, 8% at 80 will have atrial fibrillation. Imagine presenting with a stroke, and we have drugs like NOACs today, which are non-vitamin D oral antagonists, which are very fruitful in protecting you from stroke. They reduce the risk of stroke by 70% and are much safer than warfarin in breathing risks.
But they don't have electrophysiology there.
It is complete role of electrophysiology. Today we have pulse field ablation. We have pulse field ablation available today. So we have been struggling with the treatment, with cure of AFib and radiofrequency ablation. But what we have today is 3 different forms, which could be radiofrequency, cryoablation or pulse field ablation. Pulse field ablation seems to be the way forward. It seems to be the way that it will help our patients remove atrial fibrillation and keep them free. Also, it is the safest way to do ablation for atrial fibrillation.
मैम डॉक्टर अनिल गुप्ता सर, he did MD medicine before I was born.
Doctor, please tell what the indication of cardiac MRI is the best place for me.
So, I must confess, I find the best place, if I don't mince my words, there is Dr. Shoma Mukherjee. She is in Mahajan, and that's where I send most of my patients to. We have our MRI in our hospital. Also, we've brought in a new system with new technologies. Regarding, but your question was more important, when to do cardiac MRI. So you should do a cardiac MRI if you have a patient with PVCs. We'll start with that. If the PVCs are more than 10,000, you should do a cardiac MRI. You should identify why. You have seen on social media people dying suddenly. With a normal LV also they can die suddenly. So what do you want to see? You want to see do they have a scar. Echo doesn't tell you a scar. The delineation of late gadolinium enhancement happens only on an MRI. If you have a patient, you are following up hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. A hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, you must do a cardiac MRI. Because again, you want to see a mid-myocardial scar. If it is more than 10 to 15%, the patient needs a defibrillator. You could have a patient who has an ejection fraction, has CAD, post-MI, PTCA done, has EF of 40%, but had one syncope, and everything looks alright to you. Do a cardiac MRI. He may be having a scar. So the role of MRI has really increased. One, because of its availability. We are still struggling for people to read it well, but soon it will develop and it is reaching there.
Thank you.
Ma'am, wonderful lecture. 2-3 questions, small ones. Once when we see the Holter reports, sometimes bigeminis or sometimes the bradycardias appear. What are the significant numbers? I mean, if they appear in 500 bradycardia episodes, do we consider this important?
I'll answer this and then we go to the next. So, as I mentioned, depends. Is it sinus bradycardia or is the bradycardia because of an AV block? That means the sinus not fire but the electrical impulse could not go down. If the bradycardia is because of sinus flow, treat it if symptomatic. Symptomatic sinus bradycardia warrants treatment. Don't wait for a 3-second pause. Don't wait. He's symptomatic. What symptoms? He doesn't have to fall down. He could be symptomatic with just fatigue, tiredness, lightheadedness, palpitations. So, documented symptomatic bradycardia, treat. Now, if the patient had no symptoms and it was sinus bradycardia, put the patient on a TMT and the patient exercises well, achieves a good MTHR, more than 70%, don't worry. But if the bradycardia during wakeful hours is because of an AV block, you can see the P wave, you can't see a QRS. Why? Any AV block, why? If during daytime. Sometimes, because of high vagal tone, at night, you can develop AV block and don't need anything. So this is a simple answer to your patient of bradycardia. PVCs. I think PVCs is something which everybody wants to know more and more because you see them a lot. If you see the EF is normal, the TMP is normal, the patient has monomorphic PVCs, 500, say 500 to 1000 in one day Holter. Don't worry, don't treat, do nothing, just as an avoid tea or coffee. But if this patient has an EF of 30% and has 500 PVCs, worry, he can die of sudden death because of PG. So everything depends upon the patient's underlying cardiac condition. If cardiac condition is good, even 2,000, 3,000, don't worry. I said I had 10,000 PVCs. I didn't worry. If the heart is normal, but if the heart is abnormal, you should worry even with 500 PVCs.
Thank you.
Ma'am, I want you to be introduced to our batchmate. He had 270 patients today, so he could not, but he just wanted to come and see you. And the last thing on his priority list was a glass of beer, but he still came. He is Jitendra Saxena. He is the glory of our batch, 79 man. We love him, man. डॉक्टर अपना जस्ट कुछ बोल दो कुछ बोल दो
बोलूं क्या मैम I heard a lot about you, attended so many of your talks. You may not know me, but I know you so well. So thank you so much, ma'am. You have taught us how to interpret the ECG,
and the message that we get from you with your talks, it helps us a lot in our clinical practice. Thank you so much.
ये वीडियो देख लेना।
नहीं, मैम उसने आते ही मुझे बोला कि मैं आ रहा हूँ मैम के लिए। मैम डॉक्टर बायोकेमिस्ट्री सर आइए बैठिए।
Madam, good afternoon. Madam, you talk about the card ECG. What is the cost of that one?
Yeah, so the two of them, one of them costs about 12,000, the other costs I think about 6,000.
Dr. Mathur sir has a question.
Very often we see thyrotoxicosis patient and they have sinus tachycardia. And up to 150 or little more, we treat them beta blockers, they settle down. And we control their toxic phase. But many times they have irregular pulse. Now where to decide to go to central? Because normally we see those patients who are sinus tachycardia, they settle down. We don't have to worry about them. But nonetheless, keep a watch. But when they go into AFM, you say, I think there is that they need your help. So just give the guidance on them. Thank you.
You're absolutely right, sir. So if thyrotoxicosis causes sinus tachy, we don't need to worry. But thyrotoxicosis causing atrial fibrillation. So you need to worry during that phase because depending upon their CHA2DS2-VASc score, they can be at risk of stroke. So the plan here is to treat them till they become euthyroid. You must treat them, and if their CHA2DS2-VASc is high, means more than 2 in men, more than 3 in women, will warrant a MUAC. You're absolutely right. At least till they become euthyroid.
We have two patients coming for an emergency here. Of course, I refer them to next again, Dr. They are going to give, and nonetheless, this can happen when you offer, but we guide them to remain in a euthyroid state. Don't waste your medication. Thank you, Dr. Very lovely talking to you.
Dr. Akash Keshri. Sir, you have a question? You have a question. Good. No question. Ma'am, Dr. Akash Keshri is an obesity expert.
डॉक्टर चौहान क्वेश्चन की उगाही कर रहे हैं, सारे क्वेश्चन दे दो यार इनको।
हाँ, तो डॉक्टर आकाश केसरी साहब हमारे लेटेस्ट इनकम्बेंट है। He was advisor to Novo. He was in US. He is a unique combination of an MBBS graduate with an MBA, and at present he is practicing at ARTAS in Lajpat Nagar. He is an obesity expert, and he has a question.
Thank you, ma'am, for a very nice presentation. So, ma'am, I was very attracted by the business card, the ECG machine which you showed, and then also the slide with the small chest. So, but I wanted to know, with this, what I'm assuming is newer technology, what is the correlation of the accuracy data with your proper ECG?
Which data? Accuracy?
Accuracy data, with the, right? And how much information are you getting and is it correlating? Also, follow-up question on wearables. So like Apple Watch, Fitbit, Whoop, and these things. Is it going to be relevant? I mean, who would be the best person to ask that question?
So the cardiac has been validated to a tune of about 90 to 92%. The cardiac is very good. As far as other wearable devices, we have lots and lots of them. As far as Apple Watch is concerned, it's become a nuisance. The patient sees an arrhythmia and comes running, saying that I've got a problem. However, from the Apple Eye study, which had 400,000 patients enrolled at the earliest, the Apple Eye Watch was a very good tool to pick up atrial fibrillation in the elderly. So Apple Eye Watch alerts in young, not to react, but Eye Watch alerts in the young, react. In the elderly, react.
Do you have it set up where I've seen there's a feature where it will directly send you
Yes. So there are certain techniques, especially from the devices, that is the implanted devices. We get their data via Bluetooth automatically without even patient having to push a button. So the device is already taught of the parameters which it should look out for and if they happen, send the data directly to us. So it does that.
When you say elderly, what is that age cutoff?
So we can program it. Elderly, more than 70, more than 70.
Okay, ma'am, your last query from the master and the champion of National Forum of India, Dr. J.P. Tulsi sir. Your DM Viva.
No master, no DM Viva, but Dr. Panna, the benefit of all of us, let me introduce her. She hasn't been introduced correctly. She is one of the two lady electrophysiologists in the Indian Heart Rhythm Society.
Okay.
The other is, any guesses?
Dr. Vanita Arora?
Absolutely. And one of the three board certified electrophysiologists by the American and the European Association Heart Rhythm Societies. Can you tell me the three? Before you clap, tell us about the other two.
Dr. Balbir Singh?
Then the prize, yes.
Dr. Balbir Singh? Dr. Balbir Singh?
No.
Dr. Viveka? हमें नहीं मालूम, आप बताइए.
So again, Dr. Aparna, then Dr. Vanita and Dr. Claire. Am I right, ma'am? Okay. That was as far as the introduction was concerned. Now let me talk to you about Dr. Manish. Has he gone?
वो बैठा हुआ है.
So
उसको
I have been asking Dr. Aparna.
1000वीं के बाद उसको टेक ओवर करना है. वो कहाँ जाएगा?
So I have been asking you for the past 3 years this question regarding PFA versus RFA in atrial fibrillation, persistent atrial fibrillation. You have always been maintaining that RFA as good as the PFA. Now recent data suggests probably PFA is better, faster, safer as compared to the RFA. Talk us about this. The recent Heart Rhythm Society, April 2026, talked about that.
So whenever we do ablation for anybody, either it can be whenever we do ablation, how do you, for the sake of everybody, to keep it very simple, whenever you ablate or remove any abnormal matter, how do you do that? You burn it, right? You burn it. Burning is called radiofrequency ablation. Or you cool it so much, frost, not cryoablation. Up till now, that's what we were doing. Now we have the third limb, which is called pulse field ablation. What does this do? This does not cause thermal. Neither does it heat, nor does it cold. What does PFA do? It causes electroporation of the myocardial cells. What is the meaning of electroporation? The cells lose their structure. And what's most interesting is that it is specific for the myocardial cells. Why were we worrying with radiofrequency ablation? We were worrying about the most devastating complication being atrioesophageal fistula. If a patient during AF ablation develops atrioesophageal fistula, it is 200% death. But with PFA, what happens is, it is very specific and does not injure the esophagus to a tune it injures, but it does not injure it to the tune to cause atrioesophageal fistula. One. Second, one must remember that we've been struggling to get good results with RF ablation, cryoablation. With PFA, it appears promising. We still await large RCT data. PFA has been used in both paroxysmal as well as persistent atrial fibrillation. Please don't think that PFA has no complications. PFA has its own set of complications. It can cause hemolysis and the patients can even die. So remember, every procedure is not devoid of any complications, but yes, it is the first time that there is a lot of excitement for the ablation of atrial fibrillation.
So ma'am, you mentioned about three side effects. So not side effects, beneficial effects, probably in the sense that phrenic nerve palsy is not so much seen here. Also the pulmonary vein stenosis probably,
you forgot probably to mention about that, is not seen here.
No, it is seen in PFA.
Less as compared, no, no.
You get, the problem with PFA is chronic nerve palsy. The problem of PFA, if you do it, can cause coronary stenosis. If you use PFA for CTI, it can cause a block in the right coronary artery. If you use PFA in the ventricle, it can cause an crux. So PFA causes way more chronic paralysis, way more coronary artery stenosis than a radio frequency ablation.
Okay, so let's dwell a little about that. So, delayed myocardial infarction due to coronary vasospasm. The normally, traditionally plaque rupture is not seen here. So, in spite of giving an NTG infusions here, you're getting coronary vasospasm and delayed myocardial infarctions. Why would that be so?
Yes.
More in PFA as compared to the RFA.
Yes. So that's exactly what I said. While PFA appears promising, it's a newer technology. We are all trying to understand as to why is this happening with PFA. Hence they have said PFA should not be used for places beyond the PDI. Don't use it beyond PDI.
Absolutely. So let's learn a little about the CRT versus CSP in left bundle branch block with heart failure. Recent study, recent data in the HRS 2026. Yes, ma'am, your words of wisdom on that.
So when conduction system pacing came in, please be understood, it came in as a rescue. It came in as a rescue for those people where we could not do CRT. So either you do a conduction system pacing when you cannot do a CRT, or if the patient cannot afford a CRT, you give a conduction system pacing. However, there have been small trials which have shown that probably conduction system pacing may be more beneficial than CRT in reduction of QRS. Should that be the standard today? No. We need more data. So conduction system pacing is here to stay. Conduction system pacing, I showed you several cases, is extremely rewarding, should be done in the right subset of patients. Earlier when we did CRT, if we could not position the vein properly, the lead properly, we had to send the patient to the OT. But now we don't send the patient to the OT and do conduction system pacing.
So, CRT still remains the class 1A recommendations and probably CSP the class 2A or B recommendations. Talking about arrhythmia in pregnancy, ma'am. So, this was again a topic at the HRS 2026 and they talked about cardioversion versus drugs in asymptomatic versus symptomatic atrial fibrillation patients in pregnancy.
So whenever you have pregnancy and you have arrhythmias, it is a little difficult to treat, tackle. But the message should be clear that cardioversion is safe. In pregnancy, there is no problem of cardioversion. So don't fear cardio. I have not attended the HRS this year and neither am I aware of this article.
I was just going to ask you, were you at Chicago? No? Okay.
So if pregnancy...
Okay, ma'am. Go ahead.
So cardioversion in pregnancy is absolutely safe. And one must remember, there are certain drugs also which can be used for a short term. So pregnancy is a place where yes, you need to talk to a cardiologist, right, and seek the right treatment. Remember, cardioversion is
My last observation regarding this HRS 2026 was VT and ventricular fibrillations reduction by 60% if you give an ARNI or an SGLT inhibitor before implanting a CRT. Your words on that?
Undoubtedly. I think we have learned from the paradigm picture. We've learned from all of the empagliflozin and apagliflozin trials. Impedance reduced. Now that you're picking my mind. The trials done for heart failure. How did they become? And why did they become the pillars? So how do you become a class 1 drug? That's a question. When any drug becomes a class 1 drug, it has to fulfill two things. It has to fulfill a composite endpoint reduction of mortality and hospitalization for heart failure, as well as the secondary endpoints in individually has to be statistically significant. So these drugs reduce mortality as well as hospitalization for heart failure. How do they reduce mortality? By reduction of heart failure as well as reduction of sudden death by reducing arrhythmias, because these are the only drugs which actually help in reverse remodeling.
So data is very clear. Thank you, ma'am.
आज की मुलाकात बस इतनी, कल कर लेना चाहे बातें जितनी, आज की मुलाकात बस इतनी. Sir, ma'am, thank you very much. I would give it to my moderator, Dr. Kala sir, just to give me the carry home message for me.
वही बात सर, दिल जब दिल पर रहेगा उसको कौन मनाएगा? Dr. Parla, the best electrophysiologist, is there to help us whenever heart is not going the right way, arrhythmic or failing. Thank you so much.
मैम, मैं सिर्फ आपसे एक प्रार्थना करना चाहूँगा कि इस बार आप हमारी 1000वीं CMA में जरूर आएं.